Today I'm joined by Molly Thompson-Smith. She is a sport climber that represented Great Britain at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. She was the first British woman to win a World Cup medal in climbing, and she was also a European bronze medalist in Moscow a few years ago. Molly, thanks for coming on the show. Just to start off with, Molly, can you just tell us a bit about what life's been like since the Games? I know we're in that weird limbo period post-Olympics. What has it been like for you, and what's been your experience?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. But yeah, since Paris, like time has really flown by. There's definitely been a bit of a like, oh, what next? But I was very kind of sure in my decision to finish competing internationally pretty much for the rest of the year after Paris. I say that I did do European Championships after that and then lead nationals, but there were no more World Cups for me because just the qualification to Paris and Paris itself really took it out of me, and I needed some time and space away from like high level competition. But it's been amazing to have a little bit of time and space to reflect on one of the highlights of my career, I guess. It almost feels like it didn't happen to me at times. To like achieve a dream is such a wild, crazy experience. And honestly, I was never sure I would ever qualify for the Olympics. So I'm kind of just reflecting on that still, processing it, because I feel like it's such a huge thing and really hard to actually process it. In a timely fashion, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done the smart thing and had stepping stones after the Games to help you kind of transition back into, I guess, your everyday life after an Olympic Games, because a lot of athletes seem to go through that period of, you know, having such extreme highs and then struggling with those lows that come on the other side of that. I've always been interested, Molly, because climbing is relatively a new sport to the Olympic Games and the Olympic movement. Is it now the pinnacle in your sport, the Olympic Games? Or is it still something that's maybe evolving and actually, you know, you talk about that World Cup circuit there and prioritising maybe not taking part in that. Is it still something that's gradually building into the pinnacle? Because I've always found that super interesting. You know, a sport like gymnastics, my sport, the Olympic Games is the be-all and end-all, but that's not always been the case for you.
Yeah, that is such an interesting question and like an interesting kind of topic in climbing at the moment, because like you said, we're really new to the Olympics. Paris was our second time being involved in the Olympic Games. And I think it depends who you ask, really. The thing with climbing is it's a really tiny niche sport, but it's such a huge sport, like within the sport in a way. There's so many different disciplines and like types of climbing. You've got rock climbing, and then there's so many kind of subsections to rock climbing, and you've got competitive climbing. And I guess if you ask a rock climber, you know, is the Olympics the pinnacle of climbing or competition climbing, they'd probably say, no, I don't think so. But then, and even the same with like an older generation of comp climbers, they'll probably be like, no, I think the World Cups are still quite important. So I think climbing's in this weird place where it's kind of figuring out where everything sits. There's like been a lot of change and like introductions of new things like the Olympics to the sport. So I think it depends on who you ask, but at the same time, you know, I didn't do most of the World Cup season this year to prioritize the Olympics. So I'd say it is definitely up there. And, you know, the title of Olympic champion is probably the most desirable title out there if you ask any competition climber.
And climbing at this Olympic Games has been in the spotlight quite a bit right in the UK, because you've had Toby Roberts win that gold medal, which is really kind of, it seems to be that we're riding like the crest of a wave of a lot of people getting into climbing. You know, a little bit like we had people doing CrossFit a lot and sports like that. People are now starting to, I feel, explore like performance-based sports a little bit more, rather than just going to the gym to keep fit. They're like, what can I do with my body that's a bit different? I'm feeling that with more people, more adults wanting to try gymnastics. And I know a lot of my friends are getting into climbing or asking, do you want to go climbing? Or, you know, for me, I'm doing jiu-jitsu at the moment. It's a similar thing with that. Where do you think that's coming from, Molly? And was that a big moment, that gold medal in Paris, for your sport?
Yeah, for sure. I think, so when I started kind of professionally climbing, I guess, And people would ask, oh, what do you do? And I say, I'm a climber. And they're like, do you climb trees? Or like, what do you mean? And that was maybe like 8 years ago or something. And whereas now, if I say, oh, I'm a climber, people are like, oh my gosh, I love bouldering. I've been a few times. I really want to go back. Or there's this climb at my local bouldering wall that I keep thinking about. And so it's become way more popular. And I think, you know, the Olympics really does that to a sport. Like it's a platform like no other. And so I think after Tokyo, like we kind of caught the attention of the media a little bit. I know speed climbing is really popular as an Olympic sport. And then I think even in Paris, it felt like a lot of eyes were on climbing, like more than had been in Tokyo and kind of more than we were all used to or maybe ready for.
Yeah.
I think the climbing had sold out every day of the games, and, you know, the crowd was huge and super supportive. And so I think climbing's definitely riding that Olympic buzz and wave, and there are new climbing walls popping up all over the place. Now, when I speak to people, yeah, pretty much everyone has tried climbing at least once and maybe even knows Toby's name. I guess we had, I can't remember how many gold medalists from Team GB, but like maybe just over 10 or something. And so, you know, for climbing to have one of those gold medalists, and we maxed out our quota in Paris. We had 2 women, 2 men. We had 3 Olympic finalists and 1 gold medal. So I think if there was a team competition at the Olympics, we would have won that. So, right. You know, it was a really exciting competition for British climbing. And I think even in the climbing world, everyone's like, whoa, what are the Brits doing? So, yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be a climber right now. And I totally see what you're saying about like people wanting to try new sports and being more interested in their like experience doing sports. It's not just exercising anymore. It's like socializing, having a good time, pushing your limits, trying something new, learning new skills. And I think climbing is kind of a perfect sport for that, in that it has all of those things. And, you know, you get stronger, fitter, healthier, but there's that like brain stimulation as well involved with like the problem solving.
And I think that's maybe why it translated so well on TV and then for the audience that were there. Like the setup for the climbing Olympics looked so exciting. It really is like a spectator sport because you can work out, you can see almost what the climber's trying to do. And sometimes with some sports, they just don't translate that well on TV or even live. You know, sometimes if you're watching a gymnastics competition, it's almost better to watch on TV because there might be 5 or 6 athletes competing at once. You're really far away. It kind of all gets distorted. But, you know, for me as a spectator watching climbing at the Olympics this time, like it was brilliant. You know, it was great. Those sports where you can clearly see what somebody's trying to do, it's just, I found it really, really exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think that the kind of format in Tokyo was a little bit confusing for people maybe. And so the IFSC, like the International Federation of Sport Climbing, really put a lot of work into trying to find a format that was exciting to watch, engaging and easier for people to understand. And I think they did a really good job with this year's format. You know, so many people watch the climbing. I loved the graphics on the TV where people would come out to do their lead climb and you could see which hold they needed to get to. Like, it was so dramatic. And even as a climber who's watched years and years of climbing, many competitions, like, this felt different and more exciting and special. And maybe that's because there was the Olympic title on the line as well. But yeah, I think climbing came across really well, and being able to focus on almost like one athlete at a time was really nice. And as an athlete there, it was really cool to kind of have your moment out there. You know, you work so hard to get there, and to have all the eyes on you and be able to like really take that moment in and interact with the crowd as well was like really special.
Molly, can you take the time to explain your discipline within climbing, and also whether or not when you start out as a climber, if I'm a kid and I go to a climbing wall, does everybody kind of start doing the same thing and then you specialize into that discipline? How does that work?
Yeah, so I guess the discipline I competed in Paris was called the combined format, and that was the discipline of bouldering and lead climbing, which is the combined format for the Olympics was kind of invented for the Olympics. So it's not what I grew up doing necessarily. Okay. But I did grow up bouldering and lead climbing. They were just always two kind of completely separate things when I started. But my preferred discipline is lead climbing, which if you're not familiar with climbing, is kind of like the longer version of climbing, slightly more endurance based, where there's the rope and you have a partner who belays you, and the goal is to get as high as you possibly can on a challenging climb. But for Paris, I also had to do bouldering, which is the shorter climbs above a mat. And they're kind of now quite like parkour based style, technical, like test a wide range of skill sets. And you have to try and get to the top in the fewest tries, but you're allowed to like fall off and try again. We also had speed climbing in Paris and Tokyo, but it was like a separate discipline this time, and that is literally a vertical race. But for first-time climbers, I think maybe the most accessible way to start climbing is through bouldering, because you don't really need anyone else to go and do it with you. For lead climbing, you need a partner.
Right.
But I think most people will start out doing bouldering, and that is, I think that's the most popular discipline of climbing, because you can just go and do it by yourself, I guess. But a lot of people kind of have a favorite, but do both.
Right,
They're quite compatible disciplines, like you need a lot of the same skill sets for both, but there is kind of this little bit of a divide in the climbing world, like if you're a boulderer or you're a sport climber. So yeah, some people, I think if you're a competition climber, you do both, because that's in line with the Olympic format and the international format. But if you're just a recreational climber, then yeah, most of the time people do choose.
When you started climbing, Molly, was there like a typical pathway for a climber to become a professional climber? You know, was it a path that's been well trodden, or was there not really? You know, you talk about obviously climbing not being an Olympic sport when you started. For you, when you were starting out, you know, at what age did you kind of think, okay, this is for me, I want to do this properly? And how was it in the beginning trying to build some kind of a career around this sport that is very niche?
Being honest, I didn't think there was a career in climbing for me. I think when I started climbing, there was one professional climber in the UK.
Okay.
And so it wasn't really a clear career path, there wasn't an option for a career in the sport. But I just loved it so much. I was a really sporty kid, tried a lot of different sports when I was younger, but I had a climbing party for my 7th birthday and just fell in love with it instantly, and would go to the club sessions once a week, and then slowly all the other sports I did kind of dropped to the side. But for a long time, I was just purely climbing because I loved it, and doing the competitions because I loved competing. I'm a natural competitor, and I guess didn't really think about the future of my climbing or my competition climbing, but was just like all in on what I was doing at the time. But now being a professional climber is obviously a lot more of a realistic kind of career aspiration, thanks to the likes of Toby and climbing being part of the Olympics. But starting out, it was kind of once I became a Sky Scholar when I left school at 19, that I thought, oh, maybe I could actually like make something out of this sport.
Okay.
Like, how great would it be if I could turn my passion into a career? Having a brand like Sky actually believe in me and in the sport, I guess, was the first kind of realization that there could be more to my climbing than just doing it for fun.
When you were starting out, Molly, and even now, what are the barriers to entry when it comes to a sport like climbing? Like, is it a sport where you are traveling around the country to do competitions all the time, and financially it's a burden somewhat on your parents? Is it one of those sports? Is it a sport that maybe traditionally certain demographics of people would get into? What are those barriers to entry with the sport of climbing? You obviously say that right now it's way more accessible, and I'm seeing that all the time. But do those barriers to entry exist in your sport? You know, a sport like gymnastics, for instance, is very expensive. Like, training fees now are like crazy. They're through the roof. So you tend to see a certain demographic of kids that are coming through the door all the time, which I think is a negative. You know, I'd love to see kids from all different walks of life coming into a gymnastics club. Does that exist in the sport of climbing, or maybe that existed before when you were starting out and now it doesn't so much?
Oh, it definitely exists in climbing. Okay. And I'd say we have similar kind of problems, I guess, if you want to call it that. I mean, now I'm one of 2 athletes still in the UK who compete internationally who's mixed race. So it's like still a very white dominated sport. And I guess if you're talking about barriers to entry, it is an expensive sport as well.
Right, okay.
I was really, really lucky that my parents could afford to kind of drive me around the country for team trainings or youth competitions. Even climbing shoes are like well over £100,
Right.
and they don't last forever. So I was lucky I had parents who were kind of really on it when it came to asking for help, asking for sponsorship. And that also kind of set me apart from a lot of my peers when I was younger, because I saw myself as like maybe not quite a brand that young, but like as someone who could, be sponsored and then like do things in return for other people, like be a bit of a like personality in a way.
Okay.
And that's like definitely kind of followed me through, and maybe why I was able to become a professional climber earlier than a lot of my friends. But yeah, I'd say, cost is a huge barrier to entry with climbing. The gyms are there, and everyone's like, oh, you can just climb rocks or go to the climbing wall, but it's like entry is expensive, renting equipment's expensive. And if you're talking about the outdoors as well, yes, anyone could go and enjoy the outdoors, but to do it safely requires instruction and confidence. And if you've not got the people or the instructors to help you do that, then it's really hard to go out and enjoy that space safely. And climbing is a dangerous sport, so you kind of need to either have like the heritage of climbing or have the funds to have someone take you out there.
How important was that support network of your parents, Molly, when you're starting out and maybe your dad or your mum is driving you to those competitions? I think that's the side that people don't see, right? They'll see you at an Olympic Games competing, but they don't see the underneath of the iceberg. How important is that support? And, I imagine you would say without that, it's you going up there to compete, right? You've got to climb. No one can do that for you. But there are so many people that have to play a role in getting you to that place.
Oh, yeah. My family was everything. Everything for me. My dad spent countless hours driving me around the country, and they spent countless hours sitting in freezing cold, dusty climbing walls, waiting for me to finish climbing, training, competing. And for me, it was essential that they were in Paris with me. I also kind of made them come to the last qualifier as well, because I just, if it went my way and I did qualify, they were the people that I wanted to celebrate that moment with, because it really felt like a shared success. Yes, I was the one on the wall, but they were the ones who took me anywhere I needed to go, did whatever they had to do to give me the opportunities that I needed to get to this point in my career. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer of the it takes a village thing, and my family and my village and my coach. And even though climbing's an individual sport, that support network is so essential. And I think that most athletes will feel the same way, I guess. It may be you on the stage, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes to help you get there. There were so many days where I didn't think I could do it. And my partner, my parents were there to pick up the pieces, I guess, and remind me why I loved climbing, and remind me of my why, which I think is one of the most important things with doing your passion, going for something like the Olympics.
When you talked a little bit, Molly, about having that understanding very early on, you almost like a brand. Did that come from you, intrinsically, or was that maybe driven by people around you that had explained that? For me, I was a similar, I think, in a way, but I think that came a lot from my dad. I think my dad understood very early on that, okay, gymnastics is a sport where right now there isn't a career path, there's no money in it. If I'm going to be able to financially support him alongside having siblings, we need some support and help from somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that came a lot from my dad.
Okay.
He would do write-ups after my competitions and send them out to people who'd kindly given us money to get there, or he would write to the local papers and kind of taught me to how to, not shout about yourself, but kind of promote what you were doing, be proud of it, and make yourself or realize your value, I guess, as an athlete, and give me the confidence that was worth people investing in. So I think my dad was a big influence on, I guess, my aspirations to kind of become a professional athlete and see the potential in what I could do. I guess also for me, like maybe this came later on, but realizing what I could do with a platform, with the platform that I could have as a professional athlete in terms of improving the diversity and inclusion within climbing. Like, I love the sport so much. I was so lucky to have a father who kind of almost put up with being the only black man in the room for years and years. And I was like, okay, you know, what a difference it would have made for me to have someone to look up to, a role model within climbing.
Yeah.
Because I always looked outside of climbing. My role models were Dame Kelly Holmes, Jess Ennis Hill. And yeah, I loved supporting them. But when people ask me like, oh, who are your role models within climbing? I was like, oh, I don't really have any, just because I couldn't connect to anyone really. I was just doing the sport because I loved it. And so that was also a really important part of me kind of deciding to go pro and seeing my value as an athlete beyond my performance.
Was there any point in time, Molly, where that felt like pressure? Because I remember as a young athlete, for me, in a similar position where there would be local businesses or people that were supporting my career, and I really didn't understand how to use that as like a positive force. It weighed heavy on me. Did you experience that as a young athlete as well?
Definitely. I think I experienced it like from the get-go. I knew that my parents would do anything for me anyways, but I think that's, you know, on the minds of young athletes. Sometimes you've got a competition in Edinburgh, your parents have paid all that money to drive you all the way up there, stay in a hotel, you know, or like take some time off work. Like, you're thinking about everything it's cost to get there. And then when businesses kind of invest in you, I guess you're always thinking about what other people have sacrificed to make it happen for you. But after a while, I think I realized that, you know, people invest in more than just your performance, they invest in you. And so that was why it was also really important for me to kind of invest in myself as a brand, as more than just an athlete who performed, like to be someone who made a positive change in my kind of sphere, in my world. And so, yes, there have definitely been times where sponsors or people being invested in my climbing has felt like pressure, but I have to remind myself that all of these people have chosen to invest in me, and all I can do is give my best and try and be like an inspirational climber who can try and make a positive difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I wish I'd been able to look at it like that from a younger age.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah. It took a long time to get to that point. Many competitions that didn't go well, but I was really lucky to have a dad who just somehow, he made mistakes, but he just knew what to say. And
Right.
he was an athlete himself when he was younger.
Okay.
And I think that really helped. And he's still involved in sports. He's a director of football in London and works with community groups and young people in social care. And so I was so lucky to have him as a role model to look up to and to teach me, more than just about work ethic and everything outside of performance as well.
The sport of climbing, Molly, is quite an individual one in that it's you on the wall, right? Were you always interested in individual sports? And what is it about climbing, you think, from a psychological point of view that attracted you to the sport and being up there on the wall by yourself?
I was actually mainly into team sports when I was younger. Right. I played a lot of football. I played netball till I left school. But I was almost like unhelpfully competitive maybe. And I did like to take control. I don't not like excuses, but I think I found it when I was a bit older that individual sports suited me more because I had more control over my performance, what was happening. And so climbing felt like a more natural fit to me. I can go and do team sports now and have a laugh with it, but I think that's because I'm able to take the climbing bit seriously. But in terms of what attracts me to climbing, I think it's just how varied it is. When I look at other sports, they all look fun and amazing. I'd love to try them, but there's just endless possibilities in climbing. The challenges are always changing. You know, you can have a climb that's really physically easy, but mentally it's really tough. It's scary, high, or it's complex and you need to kind of keep focused for a long period of time to ensure that you climb as efficiently as possible. And the climbs are always changing, whether that's in competition or there's endless rocks around the world to go and climb. And so I think that variety is something that I've always liked, because I'm quite hard on myself. Okay. And I guess maybe the goalposts are always moving. It's nice that there's almost no ceiling in climbing. Like you can just, the challenges are endless.
What talents do you think you brought to the climbing wall when you first got into climbing, Molly? And what I mean by that is, like, what physical attributes were you bringing that lends itself to climbing that maybe not exactly gave you an advantage, but it meant that you were going to have a good chance of being a good climber if you kept at it? And then also from like the mental approach, what would you say is one of your strongest strengths that maybe has stayed with you from being a kid and starting climbing and even now when you compete?
I think physically, like, I'm a very strong climber and I adapt to strength training really quickly. So as a young kid, I was that little girl doing 20 pull-ups, like being like, I can beat all the guys in a pull-up competition. And that's kind of been my style, my like a theme to my climbing throughout my whole career, and is definitely my biggest strength. And then mentally, I'd say kind of my resilience and tenacity. I'm really good at working hard and being stubborn and just like carrying on and kind of not letting, I don't like to be defeated by a challenge, basically. So, which has come in handy with like the new style of climbing. It's changed a lot since I started. Like the climbing walls you see nowadays are just a different world to what I started on, like climbing on when I was a kid. And as cool as it has been to see climbing evolve so much, it's been really hard as an athlete who's kind of been in this strange period of the sport where I caught the end of what like climbing kind of started out as. And I've been through this like evolution of climbing into this modern, shiny, like a dynamic parkour style sport that's like really mainstream and popular. When I started, it was kind of like concrete, big blocky bits of resin and stuff. And yeah, it's changed so much, which has been really hard to learn to adapt to. I mean, even the format for the Olympics changed within 2 cycles, right. And World Cup formats have changed too. But my resilience and kind of like stubbornness has allowed me to keep banging my head against the wall, learning the new skills, kind of like teaching an old dog new tricks in a way. And so I'd say that's my biggest mental strength.
How much training do you spend off the wall, Molly? Like, you wouldn't think about it. You know, it sounds obvious, right? But you just think, oh, she's just going to climb the wall, right? But you mentioned there being super strong. What kind of work are you doing off the wall to then help the actual climbing itself?
Actually, one of the things I kind of find frustrating about climbing is that there's not much sports science or research involved in climbing. So I really feel like we're nowhere near our climbing potential.
Okay.
But climbers do a lot of like pull-ups, basic strength training. So I'll do maybe 3 or 4 strength sessions in the gym a week.
Wow.
But they're like very basic. There's not much complexity in kind of cross training for climbing. But I do think there's a lot of potential. And climbing is like a great sport that crosses over well with like gymnastics and like other sports out there. I think, when athletes from other sports come and try climbing, they're like naturally really good and they make progress really quickly. But yeah, I also do a lot of strength training because I like it.
Okay.
And I see results really quickly. But because climbing is such a kind of niche, weird sport, time on task is like really important.
Yeah. And how much of that training that you're doing, that strength training, is body weight training, Molly, as opposed to like lifting weights? Because if you were a gymnast, the sport is body weight. So any strength training you're doing outside of the gym is essentially like weight training. We wouldn't go out of the gym to do chin-ups and climb, like rope climbs and stuff, because we're kind of doing that all in the gym. But how much of your strength training is like explosive work in the gym, maybe lifting weights, or is it a lot of just body weight pull-ups and that kind of stuff?
It's a lot of like weighted pull-ups. Like climbers have this thing where they don't train legs really. Like they're very like top heavy kind of athletes. So a lot of my training is like added weight, but pulling. But I do some like lifting every now and again. And because as much as you'd think like, oh, climbing's a pulling sport, like your legs are so important in climbing. And I think they often go kind of underestimated and unloved in the climbing world. But things are changing as like more people get into climbing who have maybe grown up doing other sports or come from the gym or something. I think there's lots of new approaches to training for climbing and lots of different body shapes in climbing now as well. And that is like a really cool thing. There's not kind of one body type for climbing. There's like anyone can climb.
Are there any advantages, Molly? You talked about being almost caught between two generations, you know, the generation of climbing before it was in the Olympic movement and then now. Are there any advantages that you feel you have having experienced that older generation of that style of climbing and then coming into the new one where maybe somebody that all they've known, they're very young, is the Olympic kind of format? Do you see that? Are there any advantages that you have from having experienced both worlds?
I think maybe if you're going outside, like on rock, I say there's a lot of advantages having had that experience in the older generation of climbing. For competitions, I think sometimes it feels like, I'm trying to learn a lot of new stuff really quickly.
Okay.
But I'd say that the new school kind of athletes are really good at coordination and like pick up skills quickly, but they're not that strong, like basic strong. So I think that I guess the advantage is like, I think I have the potential to be really good at the skill stuff and do the basic stuff. And it's just a case of like time on task practicing the skills. But for the newer athletes, like they don't have the years of strength training that I did when I was younger. And so for them, getting stronger and being able to like be strong enough to hold bad holds or do basic climbing is like really hard. So
it's almost like that new generation in a way of like learned to pass an exam, like they've just learned to do that one thing, whereas maybe you have those strong fundamentals from those years of work that you've got in your back pocket. And then maybe if you can just develop that skill side, which I would imagine, I don't know what it's like, what kind of age you can carry on climbing till. But as you get older in a lot of sports, the mental side and that skill learning becomes almost more important because you can't do the reps. But if you have the reps already, that becomes like quite an advantage to have.
Definitely. I think experience still counts for a lot in climbing. And because it's such a kind of like body awareness is so important in climbing, like knowing your body really well and having all of those years climbing means that you do pick up things quite quickly. And I feel like I'm more of an all-rounded climber than the kind of newer athletes. And if you put them on some parkour style coordination boulders, they'll probably get it quicker than I will. But, you know, if you look at most of the skills required to be a good climber, I'd say I tick more of the boxes than they do.
So you're more of an all-rounder, like an all-round athlete coming to a sport, whereas maybe they're specialising a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that especially now that climbing's part of the Olympics and it is a career option, I guess, for a lot of aspiring athletes, they're going all in on the very specific niche style of competition climbing. And who knows, it might change in a few years. Like it's changed so much since I started and it's only been 10 years, I guess, of competitions that I've done. And whereas I feel like I've got a way bigger, broader base. And so if it changes, I feel confident that I could adapt to the change and it wouldn't be too drastic because I have such a large wealth of climbing experience and skill set.
What was it like, Molly, having quite a lot of early success? And maybe you would say you didn't, but I think looking at your career, when I do my research for an episode and I research a guest, you know, seeing that you competed at the Olympic Games this year in 2024, but your first World Cup medal was in 2017. That's quite a long time ago, right? And you were the first British female, I think, to ever win a World Cup medal. Is that correct?
Win a lead World Cup medal, yeah.
Win a lead World Cup medal. So what was that like, having that early success in your career and being somewhat of an outlier?
Yeah, it's felt like a long time, and I think that's something I'm really proud of. The fact that I managed to qualify for the Olympics kind of not super late, but like quite late into my career. Now, if you look at the rest of my teammates on the British climbing team. I'm 8 years older than a lot of them.
Wow.
And it feels every year of those 8 years. But they're just starting their careers and they're so young and I guess I'm really proud that I managed to qualify for the Olympics that deep into my career. What was I going to say? I've lost it. Sorry.
Yeah, we were just talking about obviously having that early success in that World Cup and being somewhat of an outlier.
Yeah, I think it's definitely made me like put a lot of pressure on myself and expectation. The sport's changed a lot, but I guess I've always been in that kind of bubble, and I've not missed a semi-final in 8 years, I think, at a World Cup or something. And so I think just being around, like, my base level is pretty high, and I know that I kind of hold myself to that expectation. But it is tough when you had so much success early on, and I'm constantly looking back being like, is that going to have been my best year of competitions? And always comparing yourself to a previous version of yourself. Yeah. But in reality, like, so much has changed since then. Like, I was kind of a kid back then, and now I'm a woman, and the sport's changed so much. I've changed so much. I've had 2 major injuries with requiring surgery and like massive comebacks afterwards. And it's just, unhelpful to look back, but it does kind of follow you, I think, through your career.
Where did those injuries fall in terms of when we look at the timescale of you winning that first World Cup medal in 2017, Molly? And I think in 2020, did you win a European bronze? Is that right? Where did those injuries fall in that timeline?
So the first one, I ruptured 3 pulleys in my finger, which is a pretty climbing specific injury. But that happened literally 1 month after that medal in 2017, which I'm kind of not surprised at, because I lost a lot of weight at the beginning of that year. My climbing level went up massively, but so did I was overtraining as well, under fueling. And so I really think that the body just knows when the season's done. Like, I usually get a little bit ill or things start to hurt a bit more. It's like your body's telling you that it needs a rest. It's had enough. It's worked really hard. And I guess I definitely pushed it too far that year, and I had a really successful year, but it was definitely too far. Okay. And I didn't slow down after the season had finished. And so, within a month, I ruptured 3 pulleys and couldn't really bend my finger. My finger was useless, and had surgery about a month later. And then the second injury was more of a freak accident. It happened at the end of 2022 or September. It was actually the day I was supposed to leave for my final World Cup of the year. I'd just gone outside climbing. But I guess timing-wise, like, it was near the end of a really hard season. I mentally was exhausted and just jumped at the chance of going out into the Peak District with my partner and just like being in nature, basically. But I took a bad fall and ended up with a double fracture dislocation of my right ankle. And so the first thought I had when I did it was, that's another Olympics gone. I didn't qualify for Tokyo, and being 10 years or almost 10 years into my international career, I was like, I feel like Paris is my last chance at an Olympic Games. And when I broke that ankle, I was like, that's it gone, because qualification started the following year. So, right. You break and dislocate your ankle 4 months out from the start of the Olympic qualification period. It's not looking good.
Yeah. Did you have surgery on that ankle, Molly?
Yeah, I did. I think it was about five weeks later I had surgery. I had to wait quite a bit.
Was it straightforward in terms of the recovery from that, or was it complicated? Because I had a similar injury when I was 21, so I double dislocated my left ankle and completely ruptured all of the ligaments in that left ankle. And it was quite a complicated recovery, because it was there hadn't been many athletes in the Olympic program that had that injury, so they were kind of making it up as we went along. I had a bit more time than you to get back before the qualification for the Olympics began, but what was your recovery like from that, and how did you maybe struggle physically, but also like the mental side of something like that, knowing that maybe this Olympic Games is my last shot, and right now I'm almost in a position where I'm not going to be able to try and make that team for the Olympic Games?
Yeah, it was a really challenging period of my life. I was fortunate in that it wasn't too complex an injury or unusual. I'd had that with my first injury. The triple pulley rupture I had in 2017 was the first of its kind, actually, and
Wow.
required like a new surgery. And yeah, like you said, like making it up as you go along, kind of with the recovery process. And that was really stressful just because there was no clear pathway. Whereas with the ankle, it was a slightly different situation in that it was like a double fracture dislocation. Lots of people have done that to that ankle. So it wasn't too complex in that sense. But there was this like, there's maybe enough time, but probably not to go for the Olympics. I don't really know what to do. And having to wait so long for the surgery to begin with, it was like every day I was sat on the sofa. I was like, that's one day less for Olympics, one day less for Olympics. And so it was really stressful, but I actually kind of was glad that I had the Olympics to aim for because it got me up every day. It got me doing all of the rehab, and I was more motivated than I'd ever been before. I think going for like the same goals year after year for almost 10 years, like I was mentally exhausted and not really achieving them. Like I wanted to win a World Cup. I wanted to be overall World Cup winner. I wanted to be a podium at Championships. And I hadn't achieved any of those dreams or goals. And I'd been working towards them for, I don't know, 8 more years. And so finally having some different goals to kind of go for was really refreshing. Like I lowered my expectations in a way, and the goalposts moved so that just being able to make my own cup of tea and take it to the sofa, or being able to get to the train station by myself, being able to do things for myself for the first time in ages was the goal, and I was achieving things. And so as challenging a period as it was, because there was a lot of doubt and uncertainty, I was actually achieving things and being proud of myself for the first time in a long time. And so as much as, yeah, I look back and I'm like, God, I wouldn't want to do that again. Like there were definitely lots of good parts about it. And yeah, it wasn't the worst thing ever. And I think I actually had a massive boost in performance after that. I made finals at World Championships. I made a semi-final in the boulder discipline, which I'd never done before, and made a lead World Cup final again. And I think I had my best ever World Cup result that year as well. So I think it just goes to show what kind of a shake up to goals and routines can do for performance and mental health.
It's really interesting that you say that about the Olympic Games, Molly. If in your sport, in climbing, if the World Cup circuit, does it take place every year?
Yeah.
Is it easy to fall victim to thinking, well, there'll be another year, and there'll be another year, and there'll be another year, and then before you know it, you know, you've gone from being 19, 20 starting and you're now getting close to your 30s and you're still doing the same thing, and maybe having that different stimulus of an Olympic Games is very important. And when I think about it now, maybe that's one of the beautiful things about the Olympics being the pinnacle in some sports, is that it only happens once every 4 years.
Yeah, and that was one of the really nice kind of realizations of the Olympics for me in Paris. Like I'd gotten used to just getting up and going year after year. Every year it's like a season ends in November, season begins in April, like super long season. Just the years have definitely rolled one after the other. But for the first time I was like, oh, hang on, there's a new kind of like timeline in competitive climbing. If I wanted to, I could take a year out and do something else, or, you know, there's not this like rush to go year after year. You know, I could look at it in 4-year cycles, and that was really refreshing. I think also seeing athletes who have had really long, like amazing careers, like going to their 4th or 5th games, like was mind blowing to me, like doing 20 years of competitive sport at the highest level. I mean, it's not for everyone, but for me, it was like, okay, maybe I felt like I was coming to the end of my career after 10 years, being like, well, that was ages. But maybe if I look at it in a different way, you know, taking a bit more time out after an Olympic year and then building back up in 4-year cycles, I'm like, maybe I could extend my career as well if I wanted to.
Is there a system in Great Britain in terms of Is there a national climbing team? Do you guys get together and train a few times of the year? What does that look like, Molly? And I'm guessing that's quite, if it does exist, that's quite a new thing that's developed, right? And maybe different for your sport.
Yeah, I think another cool thing about being a Sky Scholar was being surrounded by so many different athletes from different sports, and a lot of these sports, a lot more kind of like well set up than climbing. Climbing's still very new in a professional kind of elite sport capacity, and so we don't really have anything. We are fully self-funded. We don't have we don't train as a team.
Right.
A team goes out to events, but we travel and stay separately. It is individual to the very end, right from when you're on the wall to like how you fund, how you get to all the competitions you're training. So we all have private coaches. We do have team coaches who go out, but they're more like support staff, I guess, at events. And sometimes we have to fund them to be there as well. So
Right.
There's a lot of room for improvement, and I guess for more of a professional structure and pathway for climbing. But that's why I guess Toby's medal is so cool, is that hopefully we'll have some funding in the sport and be able to set it up so that, you know, finance isn't another barrier to elite competition as well.
How do you do that, Molly? How do you fund a career like that, to travel all over the world, potentially pay coaches, equipment, entry fees? You know, we talked at the start about how climbing is such a niche sport, but there are so many of these niche sports that I look at as being someone that's in a traditional Olympic sport. There's no money, there's no funding, there's no sponsors. Like, you just can't have a career out of it. But then there's a little sport like climbing where potentially you guys are able to make good amounts of money from sponsors, build a career, have a brand, like you say. I don't know whether you have competition fees. Do you win money in these World Cup circuits? Who's putting the money behind it? Is it people that are climbing enthusiasts? I can see you're wearing like a North Face t-shirt. You're sponsored by North Face, right?
Yeah.
We just don't have things like that in gymnastics. So it'll be really interesting, I think, for people that are listening to this, that maybe from a traditional gymnastics background, to hear about the setup within a niche sport like climbing, and then maybe there's something we can take away from that.
Yeah, I guess because, national governing bodies have never really had any money in climbing. It's always been self-funded, getting to competitions, coaching, etc. So it's always been done via people saving up from work. Like when I started, like I said, there was one professional climber and everyone else had a job on the side, whether it was usually within climbing, so route setting, putting up the holds on the wall for people to climb on, or coaching. But like the rubbish thing about the Team GB athletes route setting was that route setting is such a physically intensive job.
Okay.
It's like, holding drills, going up and down ladders all day, like picking up heavy holds and drilling them onto the wall. And then you have to, we call it testing, like trying the climbs to make sure that they make sense and they work, and then changing them and stuff. And it's like, then athletes would go and train after that, and people would just be injured all the time. And it's just, you can't get the best out of your body when you're doing a job like that on the side. But people would work and use their savings to fund their competitions. And then I guess more recently, there's been the introduction of like professional athletes with sponsors, like brands sponsoring athletes or national teams. We don't have any sponsors for team like GB climbing. We're like unsponsored completely. So it's all kind of, a lot of us have personal sponsors now, and that's how we fund our way to competitions and training. Right. I think it's slightly different around the world, but like with some countries have a more supportive setup, like in the States, I think they've got more support, but I think sports in the States is like a different thing entirely. But yeah, a lot of other countries maybe don't have to pay for their travel or anything when they go to World Cups. Their coaches are funded and they train for free as well. But yeah, it's always surprised me because we're such a talented climbing country, but we are so underfunded and supported. But yeah, I'm sure that will change in the future. But at World Cups, there is prize money. I don't know whether there's prize money in gymnastics competitions and how many competitions there are a year. But
yeah, there's not a lot, Molly. There's normally a World Cup circuit where potentially the best 8 in the world have 4 opportunities to earn maybe €10,000 if they win it. But they're the best 8 gymnasts in the world, and that's just 4 times a year. Other than that, it's very few and far between. You do have the opportunity to go to countries like Germany and France, where they have gymnastics leagues, like a football league, and you get paid to go over there, and almost like a mercenary, you go compete for their team and you get paid. But other than that, there's not a lot. It's solely reliant on funding from governing bodies. It's really interesting there. So when you go to these World Cups, Molly, you're representing Great Britain, right? But funding the whole thing yourself.
Yes.
That's so crazy. That seems so crazy to me.
Yeah, it is. It's a strange one to like represent GB or like our national federation, but they've not really put anything into us getting there. Maybe they pay our competition fee, which I think is like €100 per entry or something. But otherwise, it's fully self-funded. And I think if you win, you get €3,000 for a win.
Okay.
And there's 6 World Cups a year.
Okay, so it's not crazy. There's not too many opportunities. And you able now at this stage in your career to have a career in climbing, and you don't have to do anything else on the side?
No, I'm lucky enough to kind of be able to live off and fund my competitions through sponsors like the North Face and a few other kind of smaller brands within climbing.
And are you, is that rare, Molly, or are there a group of athletes that are able to do that right now in the UK? Or are you one of the few that maybe has done a really good job of, like you said, building that brand and also telling your story as well? You're really well spoken. But when I was doing my research today, I read about the work that you've done around diversity and inclusion, which I'm sure is very appealing to people, to brands, okay? Is that more that you've been very savvy in a way? Does that make sense? Because you get a mixture of athletes.
Totally.
You can have athletes that are just so good and have won so many medals that brands want to partner with them. And then you have other athletes that have got those achievements and they've done well, but also they're very good communicators. And somebody would, like you said earlier, people invest in people, right? And they want to support that story.
I think I came at a time where you had to be more, like having good results was great, but brands maybe didn't have enough money or weren't as interested in sponsoring athletes who were kind of just about performance. They wanted like reach and engagement and all these other things. So I think I was savvy and kind of realized early on the potential for sponsors and like the fact that I would have to fund my way to competition. So I needed to find a way of getting money, and sponsorship was kind of the way that I'd been taught early on. Now I think with the next generation, because climbing is more popular and there's more money in it, like being solely focused on performance is good enough. And like if you are just doing really well at competitions, you don't have to be as much of a brand on the side. But there are, I'd say like most of the national team are able to fund themselves to competitions through sponsors or like work on the side within climbing, like coaching, something not quite as like something remote and like non-intrusive on their training. A lot of people like study at the same time as training for climbing. They come to Sheffield, which is kind of like the hub of climbing in the UK, and train and be a student. What was your Olympic experience like, Molly? What was it like getting there to the games, seeing the rings everywhere and being at an Olympic Games, especially after the setback that you had with your injury? When you look back now, I know it's still very early on. How do you reflect on your time? And what was it like when, you stepped up to the wall ready to climb for the first time and, you performed in front of the world? It was like magical. It was almost like I felt like I was watching myself in a way, like, just something I've dreamed of for so long and thought about, but was never quite convinced I would actually be able to make it a reality. And so it was such a privilege to be there. I was always a fan of the Olympics when I was younger. I say climbing's been in my life for a really long time now, but the Olympics has been there for even longer. I was that kid just in awe of all of the Team GB athletes, like competing across the world. across all of the Olympic Games. And so it was just such a special experience for my two kind of like sporting loves and life passions to come together, and that be my moment, and have my family and friends there with me, and people who have put up with me going ghost mode for weeks because I'm competing or in a training hole and have no energy to like spare chatting and socializing, or, you know, my parents driving me up and down the country. It was so nice to share that like very real physical kind of reward for all of the hard work and sacrifice, like be there in Paris with them. So yeah, it was amazing. And on a more like personal non-performance note, being in the village surrounded by so many athletes from different places with different skin tones and different shapes and sizes was honestly, like, I can't even describe what it meant to me. Like growing up in a sport like climbing, which is not diverse, it has been hard. And so just to walk around the village and see that sport really can be inclusive and full of cultures and like, yeah, just everything I've always wanted it to be, but never quite had in climbing was, again, a really special moment for me as well.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you walk into the Olympic Village and you see every type of human. You walk past volleyball players and then you see Simone Biles, who's like 4 foot, and you're like, this is so weird.
Crazy. I had a gym session on the day of the opening ceremony and it was incredibly intimidating, but I was like, wow, I'm in like a gym full of excellence. Like the best athletes in the world are all in this gym right now. And it was just a crazy experience.
It's funny as well, isn't it? Because you see people do really specific training in like an everyday gym setting and they're doing exercise and you're trying to work out what are they doing?
Yeah, well, like I was there doing like some fingerboarding pickups and everyone was like, what the heck is this girl doing? Like she's got this little piece of wood and she's picking up kettlebells with it and she's got chalk and like, what is she doing? And then like I was doing some one-arm pull-ups and like in climbing, that's like impressive but not crazy. And then to other sports, that's like, wow.
Yeah.
And then I'm watching other people do stuff and I'm just like, I could never do that. That is insane. And just like seeing so much like such diversity and talent, and it was amazing.
What is your setup like now, Molly? I know that you don't spend all of your time in the UK, so what does your life look like, and what are your plans and ambitions moving forward? Are you planning to push for the next Olympic Games in 4 years' time? Are you not thinking that far ahead? How do you see the next few years playing out?
I think if you'd have asked me this question before the Olympics or before qualifying, I would have been like, I'm ready to kind of move on from competitions. Like, I've had my time. It was great. But now I'm like, I'm just tired and not enjoying it as much as I was before. But then going to the Olympics was such an amazing experience that it definitely made me think of LA. But I was like, I'm going to give myself some time after Paris just to see where how I'm feeling once it's all kind of like settled a little bit. But I would love to go for LA, but it's definitely dependent on the format. Climbing is still figuring itself out in the Olympics, and we've asked for 4 medals in LA, so an extra 2 medals compared to Paris, with the hopes that we could have individual discipline events in LA. And if that was the case, then I would go for LA, I think, just to do the lead climbing. Because as much as I enjoyed the combined format, bouldering is really hard for me and it's not something that comes as naturally as lead climbing. And that's kind of where my love for climbing or competitive climbing began. So I would definitely go for it if that was the case, but we don't know that until next spring. So I'm kind of taking some time away, just climbing outside, doing some rock climbing and thinking about how I can do some more work to make climbing a more inclusive space. It's been something I've done little bits on over the years, but I've always been so focused on competition that I've not really had the time to do as much like tangible work as I would have liked to. So in my future, I definitely see more community-based work. Maybe that's advising brands or climbing walls or running community events, like trying to take people from the city to the outdoors, like get more different groups of people climbing, helping design products that make climbing a more inclusive space as well. That's all very much of interest to me. But yeah, maybe there's some more competitions in there.
Do you feel like climbing will always be a part of your life, Molly? And even if, let's say, you decided to retire at some point within the next 4 years, is your life still going to revolve around climbing?
I think my life will always have climbing in it. I think climbing is one of those sports where it's a lifestyle. And when I would speak to other athletes in the village and they'd be like, what are you going to do after the games? Like, what are you doing with your off season? I'm like, I'm going climbing. And like the rowers, I was like, would you go rowing? And they're like, no way. And so I think that's one of the special things about climbing is that I think I'll always do it. When I'm not competing, I'm still climbing. It might be outside, or I might be going down to the wall and like drinking more tea than actual climbing, but I think it will always be a part of my life. So even if I retire, I'd like to see where my limits are climbing outside, because that is a whole kind of area of climbing that is just as popular as competitions, maybe with a slightly more niche audience of like just climbing fans. But yeah, there's loads of, I guess, barriers to be pushed, like climbs to get the first female ascent of. And so that's really like speaking to me as well.
Yeah, it seems like the possibilities are actually pretty endless in terms of what you could do after you finish this one chapter of your life. What advice would you give to a young athlete, Molly, that's maybe in a sport similar to yours that is expensive, and in order for them to potentially, they've got ambitions to be a professional, go to the Olympic Games, but in order for them to do that, they're going to need support and potentially going to have to build a brand. How do they do that in a way that stays authentic to themselves? And what I mean by that is, I'm sure you're aware of social media, and it's a very confusing place for young people, right? And people are quite often trying to look a certain way, or are trying to project that they are feeling a certain way, or everything in their life is just right, and we know that that's not the case. How do you go about, in today's age, today's time, in 2024, building that brand, building those connections, getting people to come on board and support your journey, but doing it in an authentic way that's true to you?
Yeah, I think it is hard, but I think just like really being your true self is what's most important. Like people love real and authenticity online. Like I post climbing stuff and people love that. And then I post things like mince pie reviews and people love that even more. Like just being relatable and connecting with people, taking the time to talk to other people and hear about their experiences as well. I think being a nice person goes a long way, and just like sharing your story, not trying to fit into a box that someone else has created, I guess. Like just keep doing you, working hard, like your performance will speak for itself, and then just be a nice person and maybe think about things outside of your performance that you care about, like maybe pick one or something. Like for me, it is inclusion and diversity, because that's like something that's really close to home and something I'm really passionate about, and that's something that I would like to work on outside of my performance. And I think that's an attractive thing for a brand as well. They're able to support you in your performance, but then they're also able to support you in supporting the community, and that's something that's really nice for you and the brand. And so yeah, I think just stay true to yourself. Don't do things that you think other people want you to do, but you're not actually, that's not you. And maybe pick something outside of your performance that you care about. And I think that also helps to bring perspective and balance into your relationship with whatever sport it is that you're trying to do.
I think that's a great piece of advice, Molly. Molly, just to finish off, what advice would you give a young Molly starting out in climbing? And what advice would you give somebody that's maybe an adult, has never tried climbing, and they potentially thinking about going climbing for the first time?
Okay, advice for young Molly would be to embrace what makes you different in climbing a lot earlier on. It took me a long time to love my hair and be okay with being different and seeing it as something to be proud of. I spent a long time trying to look and feel like everyone else in the climbing world, and it took way too much effort it probably affected my performance negatively. It made me miserable at some points in time. And yeah, I'm just way happier now that I have learned to kind of accept myself for who I am and embrace what makes me different to everyone else, because difference is not a bad thing whatsoever. So I would say, yeah, just like learn to love yourself a little bit more a bit earlier on. And then to an adult who's thinking about starting climbing, I would say try and push yourself a little bit, but don't feel the need to get to the top of the wall the first time. Like, climbing is scary. It's so different from anything else that you do in daily life. Like, you're not going around climbing things. So just like expand your comfort zone, your box a little by little, but don't feel the need to throw yourself in the deep end. Even if it's like you get one hold higher the next time you go climbing, that's amazing. That's progress. And I think you'll enjoy it a lot more. There's some enjoyment to be had in being scared, but on the whole, the experiences I enjoy the most are where I still feel comfortable and confident. So yeah, and find a good group of people to go with you, or say hello to someone new at the climbing wall, because it is such a social friendly sport.
I'm smiling, Molly, because all of my teammates that have been climbing, one thing they've told me is my knuckles and my fingers from that after the first session, because they've clearly gone for like 2 hours and they're just trying to get to the top. And they're like, yeah, I've got to have a rest. I can't do it again. And I think it's put some of them off. And maybe that was similar to me when I first went to jiu-jitsu. I went pretty hard, pretty fast, and got strangled about 10 times. And I was like, do I really want to go back next week? I'm not sure I want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, take your time with it. Like, sore hands and everything. Yeah, your body is not used to climbing, basically, if you've never done it before. And I want people to enjoy it and go back. So yeah, just pace yourself.
Have you ever done any gymnastics, Molly?
I have not, but it was a sport I always wanted to do when I was a kid.
Yeah, because of the body weight aspect and the spatial awareness. It'd be something I'd be interested in to see what you would be like on specifically I'd say a trampoline, because we actually do most of our spatial awareness training on a trampoline. So like, you get kids, normally they'll come 10 minutes before the session, they'll be on a trampoline into a foam pit and they'll just throw themselves. Yeah. And they're learning to be brave, but learning where they are in space and time. I'd be really interested to see how quickly you might pick up some like gymnastics elements. I've got one more question. I've got one more question, Molly, before we finished, because I think it's quite an important one, and I thought of it as we were going through, but I forgot about it. Because you're in a bodyweight sport, Molly, and you're trying, I imagine, to be quite strong, but also be light at the same time. Has there been points in time where you spoke about getting really light, where you've maybe taken that too far? And is that a problem within a sport like climbing? Because it's a big problem in a sport like gymnastics. And if there's anybody that is maybe battling that at the moment, would you have any advice? Because for me personally, when I was 26, I was massively struggling mentally, but I also was essentially diagnosed with an eating disorder. And I was quite dismissive of it in the beginning. Then I realized that I did have one, and I was massively restricting my eating. And it was just having the biggest negative effect on my performance. And I had to understand that the hard way by turning up to a competition, putting my hand up to do a routine, and then as I started a routine, I realized I've got no energy, and I was about half a stone lighter than my normal weight. Is that something that is prevalent within climbing? Have you had an experience in it, and what would your advice be? Because I think that'd be really valuable for our audience that are gymnastics based and are in a bodyweight sport.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a huge problem in climbing at the moment. It's something that there's been, well, firstly, there was no talk about it, and now people are starting to speak out about it, and it's kind of like a hot topic in climbing because, like you said, it is a strength to weight ratio sport, and being aware of your weight and is kind of on the mind of any aspiring and serious climber. I think that year in 2017 I've never had like an official diagnosis of an eating disorder, but I was extremely restrictive with what I was eating and lost a significant amount of weight in a short period of time. And I did have a boost in performance, but it was very short-lived and ended with injury. And I've definitely carried on some maybe disordered habits from that year, and still things I kind of check myself on even now. But for me, I went and I studied a nutrition course online for a year because I was like, I want to educate myself properly so that I can, whenever these like kind of disordered habits or bad thoughts come into my head, I have the science, I have the knowledge to tell myself like, no, this is actually like, these are the facts. We know that a fueled athlete is a stronger athlete and, you know, things like that. And so it's something I have struggled with over the past, but ultimately like my strength is strength and I can't be strong if I'm underfueled. And so that's something I always remember, but it does get hard because I think naturally as the season goes on, I lose a bit of weight due to stress and everything. But then by the end of the season, I'm like, wow, I'm tired. I don't have the energy to socialize and all of that stuff. And now I don't have the excuse of being in competition anymore. So it's hard because like it is a performance tool, losing weight. And I think that we should talk about it so that people know how to do it safely.
Yeah.
But then we need to be able to gain the weight back and not lose a dramatic amount of weight. I think figuring out with the help of a dietitian or someone who knows what they're talking about, like where your training weight and where your competition weight is at, and then making sure, and you can get friends and family to help, I guess, keep you accountable to that and check in on you, but making sure you're able to kind of like switch that off when you need to is really important as well.
Oh, amazing, Molly. Thank you. I think that's going to be really valuable. It's been a really interesting conversation. I'm going to try it. My friend Frank, who is a former Team GB athlete, he is really into climbing and he keeps asking me. So the next time he asks me, I'm going to go and I'll let you know how I get on. But thank you very much, Molly, for giving us your time. All the best for the rest of the year. Make sure you take a break. Enjoy Christmas. And thank you again. Molly, before we go, where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram, MollyTS123.
Amazing. Thank you. You take care, Molly, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much for having me.